What up? What up? Welcome back to Shoot Punch Kick. We're three former champions of the All Valley Karate Tournament. Shoot the shit, reviewing action movies from the 80s and 90s. I'm Dash, joined as always by Telly and Carlos. Telos, that's your hybrid, your hybrid construction. What's going on?
What's going on, brother? How's it going, Dash?
It's going well. Watch some grown animal. I was watching a review that was Siskel and Ebert, and Gene called them erect standing turtles. Thought that was an interesting adjective for them.
But you know where his mind was at.
Clearly. Today we're going underground with the 1990 hit that Telly just alerted me. This is the 35th anniversary of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. This movie was released on March 30th, 1990, directed by Steve Barron, who's number one, sending Pretty Woman down to number 2. House Party was holding on at number 8. What are your guys' personal histories with this gem? Carlos, let's start with you. 1990 Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
So this is a personal favorite of mine. When I was a kid, I was absolutely obsessed with this movie. I very clearly remember going to see this movie in the theaters with my mom. We were over at the Marlboro Theater, and this is the first movie I can remember going to, and there was like a line outside like to get in. And I remember going to McDonald's afterwards. I remember my uncle getting me this tape as a gift, and he used to do this stupid thing where he's like, I got a gift from you somewhere, but I'm not going to tell you where it is, and it's somewhere in the apartment, so you got to find it. Mm-hmm. Of course, it was the very day after the tape had come out, the VHS, so I knew exactly what it was. And once I found the tape, I played that thing on repeat over and over and over. I knew the movie line for line. It was played at my birthday parties. Now, having said that, I haven't seen it in its totality in years. I think it was on like maybe 2 years ago on TV, and I just kind of had it playing in the background. But this is the first time I've seen it start to finish, and actually with an eye to like evaluating it since I was a little kid. So this was a real blast of the past for me.
You should start bringing this back in the birthday rotations. You'll have more people at your party. Be like, hey, everybody. Ninja Turtle Day. Telly, what do you remember about this?
I'm a couple of years older than you guys, so I was just like a little bit outside that window of when like Turtles were popular. That's when I was starting, moving away from the after school, cartoon series. So when the movie came out, I did see it in theaters because my friends were big Turtles fans, but I was like, I think I just turned 13. So this was also like, just maybe a slightly too old for this kind of shit. But I remember enjoying the movie. I saw it in the movie theater and have not seen it in 35 years from beginning to end. So it's very interesting to kind of go back to this after all this time.
So you only saw it the one time in theaters and then never again?
From beginning to end, yeah, just only the one time in theaters and maybe clips here and there, and watching some reviews on YouTube where they show some clips, but just sitting down watching it from the very beginning to the very end, haven't done that in 35 years.
Welcome back. This one, by the time it came out, I was all in on Turtles. We did the shift from Ghostbusters, which was like my entire identity. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles was the franchise that picked that up with just an endless amount of toys. They already had the cartoon by the time the movie came out. And for me, I'll say that this was probably my first adaptation of something that I was really into in one form that was now getting like the live action treatment. And I saw this opening weekend. I feel like I saw this in one of the Embassy movies on Times Square. There was like 2 through 4, and then 1 was its own.
Those all gone.
I feel like I saw it in one of those, and I remember there was hype around it because I remember we got the poster, just from someone selling them on the street at like a table, came in a frame, and that was the first movie poster that I had up, which wouldn't be the last.
I think I had that movie poster too. Wow. Memory unlocked.
Hey, dude, this is no cartoon. It was like really leaning into it. And then also, I had all the toys. And then like Carlos, I had the tape. And I remember the tape started off with the Pizza Hut commercial where it was like a
Mhm.
kid
Off in
playing
the distance, the
distance.
game's dragging on.
That's how real this movie is. I could sing that entire commercial right
Oh
now
yeah,
with
it's
no
important, you
pauses.
know.
Yeah, it was just such a big part
Wow.
of my childhood. But unlike these guys, I mean, I stuck with it every couple of years watching it. And Telly asked me before the podcast how long it's been. It's been a couple of years since I
Mm.
saw it, but I have revisited it constantly with just that kind of like adult eye, comparing it to what's out. But really excited to talk about this with you guys, especially
Yeah, me
having
too.
you haven't seen it in so long. So we're going to Gemini on this one for a plot synopsis. I'm going to see how it stacks up with the OG. In 1999's teenage, 1990s teenage, it's already off to a bad start. In 1990s, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, four mutated turtles, Leonardo, Michelangelo, Donatello, and Raphael, trained in ninjutsu by their rat sensei, Splinter, emerged from the New York City sewers to combat the criminal Foot Clan, led by the sinister Shredder. When reporter April O'Neil becomes entangled in their conflict, the Turtles must protect her and rescue Splinter after he is captured. With the aid of vigilante Casey Jones, they battle the Foot Clan, ultimately confronting and defeating Shredder, restoring peace to the city. What do you guys think of the Gemini treatment?
Solid, solid. I
Yeah.
mean, like, these things are getting better and better. These language models are starting to scare me a little bit.
Yeah.
I feel like ChatGPT puts a little bit more pizzazz
Spice.
on it. Yeah, they're a
Yeah,
little
yeah,
bit
yeah,
more
yeah,
like
yeah.
reclaiming the cinema space for like they'll add
Yeah.
a little extra.
Yeah, we should
So
Hell
compare
yeah.
next time.
so what did you guys think? You watched this, you put it on. What was the initial thoughts? We'll start with you, Carlos.
So I really loved it. Again, I, with adult eyes, can recognize some of the things that were kind of where it's lacking, but still, even having said that, I still found myself, even after all these years, it's funny how memory works. I still felt right back into it. Certain scenes came on, and I knew exactly, oh, a fellow chucker, eh?
Oh
Like,
yeah.
I was saying with, I watched this with a friend of mine, and I feel bad for her because I was being ridiculously obnoxious. I watched this entire movie with glee. And again, if you would have asked me when I was 10, I would have told you this is the perfect movie. As an adult, I don't think it is, but nostalgia just goes a whole long way for the charm of this movie. And so I really enjoyed it. What I will say is, as an adult watching this, I don't really think that this is a kids movie. I mean, again, it's based on a franchise that was marketed towards kids and the toys kind of therein. But there's some really dark themes in this movie that I didn't remember like really watching or understanding when I was younger. And so, from an adult perspective, it's a wholly different thing.
Mhm.
But all in all, I really enjoyed it still.
How about you, Tully?
So I was never the biggest Turtles fan, although I was a casual fan. Watched the cartoons once in a while, played the video games. The arcade game I thought was awesome, even though I
Yeah, Turtles in
wasn't.
Time.
Yeah, even though I wasn't the most like entrenched in all the Turtles lore, I really didn't know like their personalities and who was who. And when I watched the movie, I really wanted to like it because there was so much hype about it. I thought it was okay when I saw it the first time, and then now watching it as a middle-aged man, there's some things I admire about it, but also some I see some of the sort of the seams where it's like lacking. And I had the same experience. It was like there's things I liked and things I didn't like, and yeah, look forward to digging in deeper.
Dash, can I ask you a question before we push forward? I'd ask Telly, but I don't think it's appropriate. So, of course, everybody who's a super fan of the Ninja Turtles, right? And especially if your friends were, you chose a turtle. That was you,
Yeah.
right? So, I'm going to take a guess as to which one you claimed,
All
but
right.
then I want to know, right? And then I want you to guess who you think I claimed.
Yeah, sure.
All right. So, if I had to guess, I'm guessing that outwardly, personally, you chose Raph, but I think everybody else who would have thought to ask you that question would have immediately went with Michelangelo.
Oh, really? Nah,
Yeah,
I'm a Leonardo.
Leo. Okay.
I just thought in terms of fighting, he had the best weapon. Like he just
Yeah,
straight up had
katanas.
swords. I didn't fully understand the Sai as a kid. Like it's such a
Okay.
defensive weapon, which makes
Yeah,
sense.
yeah.
I saw a video that actually was really interesting about it. But like, I thought it was the corniest looking in the cartoon, and they
Uh
never
huh.
really showed him using it. Like everyone knows what a sword
Effectively.
was, and it was
Yeah,
like, yo,
yeah.
this dude got a pair of forks. That seems kind of corny. But I thought Leonardo
Uh,
was cool, even though he was like, a goody two shoe. I'm gonna say you would pick Donatello, and I feel like people would pick Donatello for you.
Yeah, absolutely right. You know me pretty well, man. I was always a fucking Donatello fan, and I guess I wear my heart on my sleeve. So absolutely Donatello. Okay, at least now I know when we're having this conversation that I have to take this from the perspective of a Leo.
Yeah, yeah, just the lens of which I'm watching. So yeah, this movie was released on March 30th, 1990. Just a little context. It doesn't get a lot of love for it being one of the first comic book movies. I mean, this was coming out around like there was a lot of like failed Marvel movies like Captain America and Fantastic Four, but really there was only, I guess, Superman, kind of off the heels of Tim Burton's Batman.
So if
What
I
you
could
got,
be
Tuck?
contrarian for a second, I feel
Yeah.
like because this was more of an adaptation, technically what led to this film was the success of the cartoon series, right? So this was kind of more of like based on that IP. So you had, yeah, I wonder, like, I guess in retrospect you could call it a comic book movie because the original IP was a comic, but I feel like this was more of a spin-off of the cartoon series.
Well, I
Would that be
think
accurate?
it
Acting
came
fan.
out.
So
Well, I mean, it came out after the cartoon, but the source
mhm,
material is mostly from the
mhm,
comics. So, like the plot points, a lot of the
The tone too, like it has a much darker tone than
mhm,
the cartoon. Going back on it, as much as I loved it, doesn't really hold up as well. I mean, it was clearly aimed at kids to
yeah.
the extent where like somebody like Shredder comes off almost comical,
Mhm.
right? He's not scary at all.
Yeah,
But if you look at the movie, it has a much darker tone, and the comics kind of
yeah,
also had a much kind of darker, more adult tone. And again, to my point of like, I don't really understand how this was a kids movie. I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I read somewhere that at the time that this came out, this movie had more acts of violence than any other movie up to that point. Like it's one of the most violent movies of its
Yeah.
time, and even the way it's shot is again a much darker, kind of grittier
yeah.
take on New York City than the cartoons really ever were.
Yeah, I mean, they had that, but it was written by there's three writers credited. Two of them are from the comics, but there's a lot more parallels from the movie to the comic than I think from the
Mhm,
cartoon, where the foot soldiers are like animatronic; they're not human beings. There's like they have their own lair, and I think the one of the main things was just like, oh, they eat pizza. Like even in the cartoon,
mhm.
Splinter used to be a human. There's a lot like different plot points, but I think it leaned to that. But yeah, it was definitely a successful cartoon. But interesting enough, big studios passed on it, still seeing it as like a perceived risk, and also the tone. I think some of that's probably just from like the case studies of like what would have done this really before it. Like I guess like a Howard the Duck.
I guess, yeah. For me, it reminded me a lot of Masters of the Universe, actually, because that
Hmm.
was based on a toy line. The movie was much darker than
But this is way
the
better than
cartoon.
I think.
Yeah, I'm not saying. Well, we'll talk about that another time. But yeah, I thought like in
Yeah.
terms of just sort of like an apples to apples comparison, like based on a toy line, a children's cartoon, and
Hmm.
it's that kind of direction you're going in. And I think part of that is also a result of the budget and the limitations of the effects back in the
Hmm.
day. Because in Master Universe, there's only so much fantastical elements. There's only so much you could do. So they made a time travel story, and you had He-Man in present day.
But I mean, also, I think the comparison's a little bit skewed just because there was never a source material for He-Man. He-Man, I think, started off as a way to sell toys, as opposed to like TMNT starting off as an actual comic, and then people finding ways to make
Mhm,
toys like out of it. So at least like TMNT had this deep lore kind of backstory to be able
mhm,
to pull from. Where if you watch He-Man, again, neither of those two cartoons are really all that great or hold up at all. But at
mhm,
least the cartoons were just an avenue to the kids, whereas for these two different subject matters, there's no He-Man lore. So I
mhm.
mean, I feel like He-Man was at a disadvantage
Yeah.
because what do you pull from?
I'm
There's
not.
not a whole
I'm
lot
not. I'm
there.
not defending He-Man, Masters of the Universe by
Kind
any
of sounds
means.
like you're
Yeah.
defending
Yeah.
He-Man. I'm
Yeah.
just
No.
saying.
No.
So aside from Kevin Eastman and Peter Laird, who are the creators on the comic book, the other writer was Bobby Herbeck, and I thought he had like really one of the most interesting IMDb's. It was 5 entries. It was an episode of Different Strokes, an episode of The Jeffersons, and then 3 episodes of Small Wonder, and then this, which I was like,
Holy
Small
shit.
what a
Wonder.
pedigree of
Wow.
writing credits. But I
For
mean,
Different Strokes, he didn't do the bicycle shop episodes, right? Then okay,
A
give
special
him
episode.
yes.
yeah, he might have did like
Okay.
the first episode. And they're like, all
Yeah.
right, the first pass. This movie, just talking about the story, I thought like as a kid, I was just really surprised by just how gritty the tone was, just a lot of the themes. And what I find like really interesting and I think is cool in a movie is like, you take your characters and you're like, what is the most like terrible things that could happen to them? When are they at their lowest? And that's such a bold, you don't usually see that from a kid's movie. And I think that,
Mm-hmm.
usually they go on an adventure. There's not that much at stake, but this one, they're like, hey, this is the
Like the Lost
first
Ark
time
died.
that they've gone out to fight anyone. Kind of goes poorly with them being like tracked and seen. Their father figure is forcing them to, really discover who they are when he's not around, and what kind of, I guess, solo people that living underground, away from the public eye. A lot of different
Yeah.
tones and
You know,
methods messages coming in. What did you think about the overall just like
well, I mean, it was crazy to me again to the point of this not necessarily being a kids movie, and maybe something that didn't occur to me when I watched it as a kid is like even in the very beginning, there's a scene where Splinter's talking to Raph, and he's like explaining to him like, I understand you've got this beast inside you, this anger, and you don't know how to deal with it, but you choose to like carry it on yourself, and you have family. It just seemed like a very adult and tender and like emotionally intelligent scene to have in
Mhm.
a kids movie, and it was handled, I guess. Again, kudos to the costume makers and designers that they were able to make these costumes look so expressive and
Mhm.
convey so much emotion in some of this stuff. And again, as a kid, totally lost on me, completely lost on me. But as an adult watching it, I mean, again, there's some value there. Like, it was kind of well acted. The dialogue in that scene was, well done. It was like a really tender moment. That's not something that you'd expect from, for kids. I really feel like the directors of this movie were like, we're not just making a kids movie. We're going to make a movie where we can take, a parent can take their kid and get some separate enjoyment out of it than maybe what the kids are getting.
Mhm.
Even little one-liners like, again, this is a movie that I remember line for line. The first time that Casey Jones interacts with Raphael's coming out of a movie theater, right? Critters of all movies, right? And and so his costume is like a trench coat and like a fedora, and he's like covered up. And the first thing that Casey Jones says to him is something like, "Hey, bogey." Right,
Yeah.
and as a kid, I caught myself instinctually saying that line, and it took me being an adult realize he was making like a Casablanca reference, right? He was
Mhm.
talking about Humphrey Bogart,
Yeah,
right?
there's a
And
lot
none
of
of the
those.
kids got that
There's a
line.
lot of
Yeah.
those references in the movie. Watching this again, where I was like, I didn't get them as a kid. I couldn't imagine any kids watching them now because there's like a reference to Moonlighting, the show with like
Yeah, it's like
Bruce Willis
moonlighting. Yeah,
show,
yeah, yeah. He says
Mhm.
that.
to like the Grapes of Wrath. I'm like, what the fuck, But watching it over again, I just the story is kind of like all over the place. I realized watching this, and just from a story standpoint, they stay in location. Like the scenes are very long. They just like stay in one place. It doesn't move very quickly. So I thought they was just trying to do a lot of different things all at once, and it just felt as an action movie, I guess by modern standards, it just feels a bit unsatisfying because they're kind of all confined to like minimal locations and they're talking a lot and not actually trying to save Splinter, because he gets kidnapped within the first act. I think they should have saved that for like the third act, and they're just goofing around, and yeah, it was just kind of strange. And the whole thing with April O'Neil and Casey Jones felt very sitcom-y. Um,
And also that was very played very adult. Like there's a scene where they're in the farmhouse and she needs a massage and he just like
Not as
forcefully
adult as
sits her
10
down.
Mutant Ninja Turtles, but yeah, I mean, I could see it was kind of mature. Look that up, people. But no, I mean, I didn't. I think this is a little bit more grown up than it should have been for like little children, but it also did not feel like it wasn't like the never ending story where it felt like it was like seriously exploring something, at least for me, in terms of any kind of like adult themes that it was trying
And
to
to your
dive.
point about like for kids, I remember the scene where they're showing the Foot Clan's like hideout, and these kids are like smoking cigarettes and they're like riding on their
Yeah, I
skateboard.
mean, to
As
me,
a kid, it was the coolest thing. I had seeing that as a kid. I'm like, oh, mind blown. Like, where are these kids?
Oh
These are the
yeah.
coolest kids I've ever seen. I want to be part of this. And
oh, I
I could
didn't
just
have that.
imagine as a parent going in there and like, they're saying, we don't want to glorify certain things, but like they totally glorified. And even the idea of like the Shredder is a grown ass man running like an underground ring of like thieves, but they're all little kids.
The
So
old
like the
young
doors
boys.
slide
When I was
open
No.
watching
and he
this
runs.
again, I was like, I would imagine this is what Neverland looks like on a
Yeah.
weekend, on a busy weekend. Just
No,
young boys
I can see.
skateboarding, hanging out.
no, I
Uh,
have a different point of view. Just because that, yeah, there was like a half pipe, but back there was like where the dudes were getting beat up, and like I
Mhm.
thought that it was a good like representation of just the criminal life of like catching them from really young to like also having a full life here, where even
Mhm.
when they introduced the Shredder, it was like that promotion, right? Like you picture someone
Family.
being recruited, but the thing that I liked about it was like the Splinter and Shredder, like they just had different philosophies of the same, like being outcasts and what does that mean, and where he was like, look, you got to be able to do without me, and like really band together, remember the stuff that I teach you. Shredder was like on the complete opposite, where he's like, yo,
I can't do
I'm
it
your
without me.
dad, you're gonna like you can't turn to anyone else. And I feel like it's I thought it was actually not doing a lot, because it seemed like a lot of things were really simplified down to just like moments and how they interact with each other. So, for example, like there wasn't the idea that the turtles have been doing this for 15 years. It was like they had one instance, this is what happened, and then everything kind of snowballs off of like, oh, somebody saw them on that instance. Okay, what does that mean? Then, oh, they kidnapped them, they come home. Now, what does that mean? And I thought like everything really kind of spiraled off of each other with even though it was limited set pieces, I felt like each one had a very specific idea to it really tied to what the story was, right? So it was like that being an antique that had to do with the character of why they were there, then being in the subways that had to do with why they were there, and I felt like nothing was there to just be like, oh, it would be cool,
I
let's
guess.
just
Okay,
do
so
the
I guess on that note, I have a question as being a non like turtle super fan. Just I felt watching this over again that there needed to be a little bit of more setup with all the things that were going on. Like, why was Shredder putting this group of kids together? Um,
He's the Shredder.
like Danny, that's a whole other thing. Like that whole subplot with that boy, that's completely undeveloped, underdeveloped, and it's a main thrust of the film. It's like, what was the cause of this estrangement
I've
with
never
his
seen a
father?
kid look less likely to be a runaway.
Right, exactly. So I guess I wanted a little bit more background. Like, why did Splinter like decide that okay, he's going to train these guys and they're going to go out and fight crime? And again, maybe that's asking too much for a children's movie, but things just kind of just seem to already be happening, and I needed a little bit more explanation as an adult. Maybe
Well,
as a
I
kid,
think
Well, I
you don't
mean,
need that.
some of the stuff I think was answered. So, like in terms of the Shredder part, apparently there was this group of ninja thieves in Japan that were doing all of this kind of like just taking everything that wasn't knocked down, and basically they were just a gang, like a criminal enterprise that recruits the kids. Which I thought that kid could have had like a little bit better of a story, but I
Mhm.
thought like he represented of what would like putting a human face on the foot soldier, and that would be someone who has like some sort of redemption arc. He was the person that kind of got us into that like point of view of who the Shredder is. Like we entered that world through him, so I thought he was like a decent anchor point where it didn't like fully go around. But I did think that they added a little bit of tidbits that you kind of had to pay attention about when it came to what Shredder's origins are, that this was a
Yeah.
Japanese group, the foot existed there, they did all this stuff, and now it's making its way into Japan and no one is kind of doing anything about it. And then
New
I
York.
thought it was cool just the idea of the thing that bothers Splinter, and might have been vice versa, is like they talk about the fighting styles that I guess were, not. I think Shredder's like, there's something about the way you describe the way they're
Familiar.
fighting. Yeah,
Mhm.
something
Something
familiar,
familiar.
something from
Because he
the
was
past.
mimicking
Shredder,
his
Shredder
moves from
confused
Mike
him for
Cage.
another like talking. That's another thing. Like, how can
Love
Shredder not be
that.
like, yeah, you're that anthropomorphic
Not-
rat that bit me, or it must have been another one.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
I mean,
So going.
it's a
Mhm.
stretch, but I think like the themes are there. They don't beat it all, over the head, because there's been a lot of like reboots and remakes where they go like really far into the like
Mhm.
this
the
is
Yeah.
the
lore.
human part, and like
Well,
they're reincarnate. And this one, I felt like overall a lot of the ideas are pretty simple and grounded into like one sentence, which I did appreciate for this movie with this
yeah.
many
So
like
I
moving
guess that
pieces.
was the sort of the push and pull I had with this film, because watching it again, I appreciated like the first act of the movie. They focused on the turtles and as characters, as opposed to like those Michael Bay Transformers movies where you can't have like the
Or
Transformers
the
as
Michael
the
Bay
main
Turtles
characters.
movies.
It's got to be like people that bring you that, and the Transformers get brought into the story through that character. So I
Mm.
appreciate they actually put the focus on the turtles, but then it's sort of they start introducing too many other characters, and some of them like Casey Jones, he's there, but it's I don't know. Did you need him in this story? This is like an origin type. This is the first movie of a franchise. Did you need him in that story for the first one? And then also the fact that there is not enough development with the Danny character, and also just yeah, the folk. I guess I wanted just a little bit more explanation of why Shredder was doing so much stuff. Yeah, there were those lines, but that still doesn't explain like, okay, how did he get here? Why is he dressed up in this ridiculous outfit that looked terrible on film? By the way, I thought the
Whoa,
Shredder costume.
whoa,
Yes,
whoa, whoa. Hold up.
um,
Now, I will
he
say
looked
he
like
was
he
a
was going
lot
to go on
thinner than I
solid
thought.
gold, compete on solid gold or something.
I will say upon this watch, I remember him looking more menacing. I think I had the Shredder from Terminate from TMNT 2 after he
Mhm.
took the ooze in my head as the way he was supposed to
Had
look.
the
He's
little
not
like
Kevin Nash.
blades on the
Well, he was also jacked up, right?
yeah.
And so I will say that um, I was a little disappointed seeing him in the regalia. He was looking really thin. Like he
He
just
looked
didn't look
it
menacing
looked
as imposing.
oversized. It looked like a kid in a
But at 9 years
football
old,
gear.
again,
Yeah.
I'm talking about a clear representation of the way that he looked in the cartoon,
Hmm.
right? And also, a little thing I caught was the first time you see April in the movie, she's wearing the yellow trench coat
Yeah.
from the cartoon, which I hadn't caught before.
Yeah, but
Um,
I just want to say that wasn't the baddest intro for a character, that Shredder.
yeah, it
First
was
off, they have the
the
overhead
shadow,
with
the
the
shadow line.
shadow
Mm.
looms, and then he gets
Yeah,
in there.
yep,
The foot soldiers come out and roll the red carpet, and then Master
yeah,
Tetsu comes in and like,
yeah.
reveals the
Undoes
thing. Then it
absolutely.
turns out all those kids are watching this speech. Now you have like context of like, okay, what are they? Everyone respects the Shredder, everyone's quiet. And my man gives like one of the dopest monologues I
He
remember in
does.
films. Then
He
they cut
does.
to like the Splinter hanging like backstage, all beaten up.
Mm-hmm.
Yo, that he's like, "This
That was
is a
dope.
family. I
Mm.
am your father." Like, I don't know. I
Well,
hadn't
there's
seen
And
much.
also,
Darth
like, how
Vader
how
for
brilliant
sure.
is it, like an adult way to handle the dichotomy between the two of them,
Yeah,
right? Like they both have discussions with that kid Danny, right? I mean, not direct discussions, but the speech, and then you see the way Shredder talks to him, and then like there was like one of the lines that caught me too was eventually Danny is, you don't see him for a while. He realizes that the foot is maybe not the place for him, and he absconds from there, and then he comes back, and Splinter says something like, "Oh, now you're hiding from like both families."
yeah.
Right, like a real insightful thing to say to a kid. And again, I'm sure that line was a throwaway for me as a kid. I wouldn't have caught it. But like, there's just so many different places where it just seems so adultly handled for a kids movie. And again, maybe we can talk about it a little bit later. I also immediately after watching this one watched the second one, and watching them back to back, the contrast is so stark
Yeah, well,
between. You could tell the second one was the what I said earlier about let's make a kids movie that the adults will really enjoy watching too. They
mhm.
threw that out the window completely, and it becomes like kidsy silliness in the second one.
Well, I think with this one, the father ties, like there's even the scene where they're not on camera, but they're going to the antique shop, and the whole like that whole set piece of April owning the
Mhm.
antique place because her dad, it was like, she's like, look, I know this is a place of junk, but it's, she loses money on it. And she's like, I know it's stupid to, own a place just because you miss your father. And like, no, it isn't. And it's like all of these little threads where I'm just like, damn, like, I
Yeah.
comment a lot about movies, like where I say like the ideas of the free part, and like they really went in with like a philosophy to ground a lot of these moments. And I think
Hmm.
of having like so many parallels with that, like where I felt like a little bit on the opposite end where there is a bit much going on in the movie, where you have the storyline of the turtles, you have, whatever's going on with April, you have this kid and his dad, and the turtles and Splinter, just to have like something that's run throughout and explores, and then also to have something where you have like a instance where Splinter is taken, and I like that everyone kind of responds in their own kind of way. Like two of the people bicker. There's a scene where Donatello's with Michelangelo, and he's like, hey, did you ever think about what he said about him not being there? And he's taking it serious, and Michelangelo's like, dude's up, pizza dude's owes us
Yeah, time's up.
a
Yeah.
discount. And it was just, I thought, like very economical in just saying like, hey, here's a situation, here's three characters, they're all going to do something different to create some sort of difference. Where I just think that a lot of other movies at this, with this type of topic, would be so much more heavy handed, or just over the top, to the point where you're just like, all right,
See
whatever.
Yeah, I
that's
agree.
actually the moment where the movie lost me is when Splinter is taken and they just like are chilling at the farmhouse for
Well, I
like
mean, that becomes the argument too,
several
right? They
days.
have literally an argument about that. Like,
Yeah,
why are we
yeah,
just chill? No,
but
not even at the farmhouse, but at April's apartment, right? Where he's
yeah,
like, why are we just chilling here? The plan is
yeah.
just to
They're
sit
just.
here.
I guess. I mean, again, like I know this is a children's fantasy movie, but still, like in real life, someone loved one is abducted or taken.
You're doing more
You
than
go,
just
you
eating
do a
pizza,
Liam
cracking
Neeson. You
jokes.
don't like just like sit around and make jokes and eat pizza. That's why I think they should have saved that plot, that whole thing for the end, and made like Splinter the damsel in distress. But yeah, that was
Or
just
the
kind of
third
like, why
act.
aren't you guys like searching for him and doing your thing? Because that farmhouse also looked. I mean, obviously it was like North Carolina where they filmed it, but I think it was supposed to be somewhere just outside of the city.
Mhm.
And it's kind of like, well, yeah, you don't really have time to waste. And I wonder if that was a budgetary thing, because watching this whole movie again, you realize how kind of low budget it is for something like this. And you wonder how much of the story was, and maybe some of the limitations in the storytelling was dictated by the budget. Because if you watch it again, you notice there's only like a handful of sets, and they keep going back to those sets, like the tunnel, this and that,
Mhm.
the April's apartment, et cetera, et cetera.
Rooftops with the obvious backdrops.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
rooftop.
You know what? Also, can I just
And the
throw a
rooftop
shout
was
out
too
to the
low. At least put that like all the way
a
up
little bit
there
higher
with the
up?
moon in the background. But this was like on the fifth
Yeah.
floor, and no one's like standing by the window in the background, like at the fire escape.
This
Like,
is
what the fuck is going on over there?
also, I want to give a shout out. This is, I think, maybe the second, at least, or actually, probably the third movie that we've done, that we've covered, where this idea that, like, if you go into the sewers, there's this underground network of tunnels and, like, places you could go to. You can get to anywhere in the city, right? I think they had it in Big Trouble in Little China. There was also in Demolition Man. And,
Mhm.
like,
And Jason
I
Takes
don't know
Manhattan.
enough to
Yeah.
know if that's a real thing or not, but I love to assume that it is because it
Yeah,
just seems cool.
I
Well, you
remember
bring
the
that. It's funny
thing
you
that
bring that up because this was another one of those movies. As New Yorkers, you're like, okay, that like watching it now as an adult, I'm like, okay, that is not a street in New York. Like especially
yeah.
the exteriors of April's apartment or the
Hmm.
where the underground, like the turtles' underground layer was,
Mhm.
and so I definitely saw the subbing of New York City much more. It was much more evident watching it now as a grown up that they filmed
Yeah.
they only filmed a handful of scenes in New York City.
But I'll say some of the stuff that they did is like, God damn, that's New York City. Like when they're getting those purse snatchers next to Central Park, like
Mhm.
Yeah.
that's Central Park.
Raphael. Yeah, yeah.
Walking through like the Lincoln Center after seeing Critters. But I
Yeah.
will say, like having seen this as a kid who was like riding the train a lot, I loved the idea that he was like in my subway station that looked like a subway station, and the idea
Hmm.
that the train comes by and you go in there, like I bought it, that whole like marrying of New York City, and just it being a
Yeah.
place that I was at. And like while I don't know, it felt like a New York movie to me as a kid, where up until this point, like, the 1989 Batman did not feel like a real, it was a very like artistic kind of movie. But this one, I just, I like, even as a kid, it bothered me, like with GI Joe, like, they're just standing out, no one's getting shot. You start to recognize certain things as a kid. Same thing with Ninja Turtles the cartoon, where it was like, they have swords, and then they're like, oh, let me use these balloons instead, and you're like, come on, what's going on? This one, like right at the beginning when they're first dropping those dams, I'm like, no way. That might as well have been like a rated R movie for a 6-year-old kid to see these turtles just like, cursing. I was really surprised then.
To the also to the point of like the tools that they have, I also want to give a quick shout out to smoke bombs. I, for my entirety of my life, have wished that at any point I'd have a little thing that I could just keep in my pocket, and anytime a conversation got something to where I didn't want to, I just wanted to nope out. Like, hey Carlos, did you clean the? My mom calling me, hey Carlos, did you mow the lawn? Just
Yeah.
and then just disappear. Although, as cool as that seems, also after the smoke clears, you would just see my fat ass like running up the block. But I would pay good money till this day for smoke bombs for any awkward conversation. Anytime I wanted to make a quick escape, oh man, I'd pay so much good money for that.
Yeah, what'd you think about like the ninja portrayal? Because one of the things for me was like at the time I was like big into like American Ninja, and just there were 3 ninjas. It was like a full ninja craze. But watching it now, like I feel like it's like urban ninjas, like they're faceless. Like when they're in April's apartment and they just start like flying in through the windows, like destroying everything. At some parts they're pretty subtle. At other parts they're just a straight up menace.
And the best part is, we have a message for you from our master. He just put his hand out and just smacked the shit out of her.
Yeah.
Yo, that was like, whoa, Foot Clan. That was the foot, not the slap. It was gangsta.
I thought that was like a really cold intro.
Yeah, and speaking of the Foot Clan, I would imagine that was another reason why they were not robots in the movie, because obviously that's going to be like a lot more expensive to do that.
Yeah, but I think they're humans in the
exactly.
comic.
Yeah. The only reason that there were machines in the cartoon was because you can't have
beating up
humans getting fucked up, so they made them animatronic.
Yeah.
But I think Dash, you were saying to the point that the foot was kind of just lifted wholesale from Daredevil, right?
Well, everything. So the ooze that mutates Matt Murdock is what gets on the turtles. So it's supposed to like fall through the cracks in the sewer and gets them. And so the guy who trains Daredevil is the Stick, which the guy who trains the turtles is Splinter. And then they're called the Hand. They're ninjas, and in this one they're called the Foot. So kind of like a satire, but I don't know, like as a core idea it works, and then they just kept running off with it. But I don't know, I just like the dedication to the bit, because it's like I think it's so easy for this to be ridiculous, no one to take it serious, but like everyone's kind of on board with the mission. Real quick, I did want to call out some of the humor in this film. There's a part where Donatello says, Casey Jones, he's like, "You're a claustrophobic," and he goes,
"Atomic mouth."
He goes, "I never
looked at another man."
I looked at another man. Yeah.
Speaking of something that would have went right over my head, and I love before April gets smacked by the foot soldier. She's like, "What? Am I behind on my Sony payments again?"
I was like, "Oh."
That didn't age too good.
But what you guys think overall of some of the action? I think this one is a simpler one because there's not a lot of action throughout the whole thing. So really, we have like the subway scene, we have the April's part from going from the rooftop to the ground floor down into the antique shop. We got some cool training montages in North Carolina, wherever they were, and then we got the sewer back to the streets, to the roof, battling up. What you guys think of overall of the choreography and fights and just the presentation of the ninja part of this movie?
I remember being underwhelmed by the fighting, and Carlos, maybe you probably feel the same way. Growing up and watching like 80s like kung fu movies and Hong Kong movies, you kind of like have a certain threshold of what's considered good, which is ironic because back in the day I didn't realize it was Golden Harvest that actually produced this movie.
Yep.
And and then watching it again, knowing that, I'm like, I don't really see the Golden Harvest, like the martial arts influence in this movie in a strong way. And this is because this is 1990. This is before like Hong Kong action movies became like a thing in America, and at least in the mainstream. And so I didn't. As I was watching this movie again, I'm like, oh man, it would have been great if like they got like Stanley Tong or kind of. I know Rumble in the Bronx came out after this, but it would have been great if they had more fun with the environment, the way like a Jackie
Mm.
Chan fight has. So then you can also sort of get out of having to use the weapons. But I just thought it was very straightforward punch and kick with a couple of like special effects shots.
So I'm of two minds with this. So when I started as a kid, I was mind blown. Even at, I mean, again, 9, I don't think I had the eye to see the difference
Mm-hmm.
between well choreographed Asian cinema, martial arts compared to what we got in this. So looking back on this now as an adult, I'm kind of again struck with two separate things. Yeah, you're right. It was disappointing in that some of the things seemed rather basic and there wasn't a whole lot of long shots like you see in Asian cinema where you get to see these guys do their thing in one take. Lots of strokes in like one take. However, having said that, I'm also caught by how impressed I was of the things that they were able to accomplish considering the suits,
Yeah.
right? Again, I hadn't seen everything like this. And again, I think the only other thing that we saw, even to this day, was that Warriors of kind of Zoo Mountain. But to be able to see these, full on, and those suits were like heavy and uncomfortable. They're doing backflips, they're doing windmills, and like, it had moments of real cool scenes. Like, for example, when they're fighting Shredder on that rooftop, some of that stuff is pretty well choreographed. And you know, again, I guess you guys can tell which is going to be my favorite scene at the end of this, but a fellow chucker, eh? And then like the nunchucks that were kind of happening.
Mm-hmm.
There were moments of greatness, although for the most part, a lot of it is generic. Having said that, considering the costuming that they were wearing, it's really impressive to me still.
Yes, so I echo that too. Yeah, the knowing that this was guys in heavy costumes, there's only so much you can do. But I thought there was obviously if this was made today, even under the same circumstances, the
It would
action
have been
would be much more
CG,
stylized. I'm just saying if
and it
like
would.
but knowing like the audience expectations now and all the influences that have come afterwards. But yeah, I just kind of wish they kind of leaned more into sort of the action, the more stylized choreography more, especially the fact these are Ninja Turtles. Um,
Hmm.
but it is it's a product of its time, and it was fun while I was watching it. But there's a reason why I've never went back to any of these scenes on YouTube. I was like, oh yeah, I remember that fight scene was very funny and interesting. um
Hmm.
but I wish they would
Hmm.
try to do this again with animatronic suits and choreography. It'll be interesting to see what they can do these days with that.
I think it's one of the things that I actually had described in my head to this movie, but it's really in part two. To your point about like showing the ninja ness of them
Hmm.
was it was, and it actually is a scene in two. But basically, they're infiltrating the Foot's like initiation process, and they have like it's like a mannequin with a bunch of like bells
Hmm.
all over it, and then it's like we're gonna throw this smoke bomb, and you need to grab as many bells as you can off the mannequin as you can without making noise.
Mhm.
Again, you know, you're right. Ninja Turtles, and especially with all the ninja movies that were coming out at the time, you'd expect more ninja stuff. I want to see the dude swimming underneath the water with the reed, to hold his breath.
Yeah,
There
was
was
there a
a
training?
very
I know they like were training a little bit, but I thought this movie was missing one of those epic like
like a training
80s training
sequence.
montages.
You know what else
Yeah.
they didn't use? I didn't see a single ninja star. Now I know they don't
Mm.
really use them that much.
Well,
The
I know they
ninjas,
were
the
banned
Ninja
in
Turtles.
school because kids were bringing them to school back in the day when I was at
No, you just
I
straight
had a
up
couple.
New
throw a
York. Yeah.
sigh at the light bulb. You're like,
Yeah.
this way I cannot miss. No, I
I
don't know.
could
I think
understand why in part two, like they had to tone it down because I remember like kids going to Chinatown and going to those weapon stores where
To
you
buy the
could
ninja
buy
stars.
ninja stars and sais and swords
oh
and
yeah,
everything, and the guy would be like, "Yeah, whatever, $20."
yeah, ruined it for everybody.
What
No, I
about you,
thought this
Dash?
one. I thought this one they had a good mix of like the ninja stuff in terms of like them in the apartment, and she's like, "Oh, these turtles are staying here." She turns around, very Batman esque, right? They're gone. It looks like
that
they're in the
was
the
cool.
shower. He opens it. I thought stuff like that. I really like the less is more intro of you see them fight in the dark. Again, this was like my first adaptation, so I thought the build up
Mhm.
of like, all right, when you finally do see them, the first time you see him in action really is like that subway scene really of like, you know, where he's fighting some of the foot soldiers. But comparatively, American movies they weren't known for the fighting choreography as much anyway. So this one I'm gonna give a pass to just it didn't do less than what I thought the best, you know, like
Contemporaries
yeah,
were doing at the time.
if you put this next door to, you know, next to like a Batman, and while he's not a ninja then, like I would say a lot of that was underwhelming, you know, with a guy like doing all the moves and then Batman like kicks him once and moves on. I thought that this one, like especially seeing them vulnerable, like getting their asses kicked for a big portion of like having a kind of back and forth and them around the environments of like they do some of the hits like, you know,
Yeah,
smashing the
remember?
shells together, but
So,
really
come
impressed. Like
on,
there's a part
how do you
where
guys? Go ahead, sorry.
oh no, I thought
Sorry.
there was a part where Leonardo has like the two swords and he kind of does
Throws
like
them
a
up.
cartwheel over like some of
And
them.
it's like,
So I was impressed of, you know, seeing what they sold, but you know, I wish like at the time there was more as a kid, like more of the, you know, more of those fight scenes. But I think I also had a big trauma as a kid to Raphael being damn
I was
near
gonna.
killed.
So I was gonna. I want to just kind of throw that in there too. Is like, how adult is it in this movie that you see like one of the main heroes like get really messed up bad to the extent where like it's touch and go and we don't know if he's gonna make it or not, right? And on top of that, it's not just that and then he wakes up, but you actually they had a whole sequence where you're seeing the effect of that loss on his brothers, right? I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
again, it's kind of voiceover. It's not necessarily the most artistically done, but the fact that you would even want to cover that in this movie,
Yeah, and
right?
that's why
I
I
think
don't
was really
mind
good.
the you know the farm scene because
I don't either. Yeah,
it's, you know, they while they should be like, you know, rescuing Splinter, they're also down a dude who at that moment they're like,
it
I don't
was
know
like
if
the
he's gonna live, you know. So I think there was like a kind of shift with that, and also he's like one of the team kind of people, so it was like loss of the figurehead leader and then another loss in
player.
between. And again, like, you know, in terms of I'm sure that doesn't hurt the budget of like, you know, we're gonna put them in a, you know, self-confined, but I just thought it was a good use of like seeing how each person evolved from that. And that's the thing that I like about this movie is each beat had a, you know, because of this happens. And I think by that, you know, I buy why they're there. I buy what they're doing, and you know, the solution to it is like, okay, he's back. Now let's go back and do their thing, and they're back to being a unit of family. With, you know, that being one of the threads. And I thought that they got a lot of that across through, you know, the cast and the performances. This is one of the last projects by Jim Henson, which is the goat of, you know, puppetry. And with this, I mean, I thought they nailed the suits from a like functional part of being able to do the things they did, animatronic faces to relay a lot of these like,
Expressions,
yeah,
yeah,
like
the
there's
eyes,
scenes
they're
of that.
crying and stuff. Yeah, the
Yeah,
scenes with
no,
like again, even that scene. Go ahead, sorry, Teddy.
no, the turtle suits I thought are still impressive, and especially the facial expressions. What I thought was less impressive watching this again was Splinter. It just felt very like herky jerky the way some of the scenes are. And what was pure, just like plain bad, was the flashback scenes where they just looked like they were like puppets on a stick, and they were just being
But I
moved
think that
around.
was almost intentional too. Like they increased the film grain so that you know it's the past because it's the film grain, and it almost harkened to like some of the really bad, which you might see in old Japanese like Godzilla kind of movies, or like when you watch Power Rangers and they use the footage from like that old show. All of a sudden, it looks completely different. I think some of that was hammy on purpose.
Like a charm kind
Um,
of.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe they just put all the effort into the grown up turtle
Current day
suits, and
stuff.
maybe Jim Henson wasn't part of the baby turtles because the way they were kind of moving just looked terrible. And even like, although there was one great shot of like Splinter when he's like after he I don't know after he gets his ear cut or whatever when he's
Grabs
like
it
a
and then
little
holds
one,
over
and
the
the
body.
movement, I don't know if it's like it was like stop motion or whatever, but it looked really fluid. But everything else in the past just looked very just like very stiff and like holding up the action figures and kind of moving them around in the background.
And it's funny. It's funny to your point also, like how good it looks because again, I saw this with a friend of mine, and we watched the second one immediately after. And literally, the first thing that she said when the second one came on was, "These costumes look terrible."
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah.
Like by comparison, she just thought these. I think they were going for more of a child, like kids thing,
Mhm.
so they looked a little less intimidating, a little less like real. and immediately the first thing you see is like, I don't like this.
And
And then
it's wild.
also,
They always have like the bandanas too, like drape over each. Like it's just like a weird choice of. It just feels so like kind of premeditated and polished that it's like just awkward. Everything.
and also the nightmare inducing image capture of that one scene. I think it's Donatello laughing in the farmhouse, and you
Oh
can
yeah,
see the
yeah.
mouth inside the mouth. I showed that to my friend too. She's think of nightmares.
Oh yeah. One thing that I did like is I liked the voice of the Splinter, who I didn't realize is
From his
done by
cage.
Elmo, the original Elmo,
Oh, is
which
that right?
makes sense.
That's
Yeah,
Class.
crazy.
Yeah,
has a doc out,
he
but
probably he probably had a party on the set of the Splinter hideout
Mimicking
set.
his moves.
absolutely. We got Ernie
Knowing what
Reyes
we know.
Jr.
Yeah.
under the suit doing some work, who would go on to be Kano and Surf Ninja's frontman, and Corey Feldman as the voice of
Donatello.
Donatello. I mean, they sold these. That like the suits I thought looked dope, but I think in terms of the voice acting and the presentation of them, like I bought them like 100%.
Well,
Yeah.
let me ask you this. So again, we also kind of addressed this a little bit, and so we can have a discussion on where this sits in the pantheon of Ninja Turtle movies at a later point. Clearly, this is number one, but for me, number two is Mutant Mayhem. And one of the things I liked about Mutant Mayhem was the representation of the Turtles. I feel like in every single other representation of the Turtles, they don't act like teenagers as much as like silly adults, which is why I really liked the Mutant Mayhem, because they actually got child actors to play these roles, and they sounded, and the way they spoke to each other was like kids.
Yeah.
So I don't know. What are your thoughts about how they were represented in this? Did they feel like teenagers to you, or again, to my point, were they just like kind of silly adults?
I mean, I didn't think they were like silly, but they did seem like adolescent in the sense that there's a lot of new to them. So they didn't feel like teens, right? Like I wouldn't be like, oh, they're what a group of 14-year-old turtles. But I do like that they're presented as so like inexperienced in the world that like they've never really been out. So they're babies when it comes to like their kung fu, and they're fighting and they're babies. Just like how they interact with the world, they don't know a lot. There's a lot of like mentorship from like Casey Jones. There's mentorship from Splinter. There's mentorship from April of like everyone kind of like filling them in this world that they're discovering. But they didn't come across as like, but they never came across as silly, which is why I don't mind. It seemed like collegey. I'd give them college years.
Yeah, more
Tyler, what do you think?
college
Did you
than
buy
young
it?
teenagers. Well, the thing for me, because like again, I wasn't the biggest fan. It took me. I even now watching it again, I like the characterization. I don't really know like each individual turtle's
The
like
personalities for each turtle.
So I think I would have liked more help there if I being not someone that's very intimately close to the material.
Charlie's definitely a Baxter Stockman.
What's
I have
that?
to pick one for.
Was that like the? I got the glasses, right? Or something?
No, I just love that because that's that's either a compliment or an insult, and there's no way for you to know because you're not a.
Yeah, there you go.
It's ambiguous, so I'm going to take it as a disrespect.
No, but yeah, I didn't get across that they were like 15-year-old kids. They were more, like goofy college students.
Agreed.
What'd you guys think about the humans? I mean, I don't think we need to break down each person, but we have Judith Hogue as April, Elias Cody as Casey Jones,
Well cast.
James Saito as the Shredder, who's
they need to get the guy. They need to get Cary Tagawa. They should have gotten Cary Tagawa, who played Shang Tsung, to play Shredder.
He would have been great. You know what I thought was cool with James Saito? They had, I guess he does the convention circuits, and somebody was there with their like red band. They had the red foot soldier bandana, and he like was like, "Yo, can you dub me like a foot soldier?" And he did like kind of like a baptism and put the thing. That's like I would totally cross that off.
Those fan conventions, I imagine for actors are probably so dehumanizing.
Yeah, they're like, hey, do the thing that you did that one day 35 years ago.
And it's the only thing you're known for,
Listen.
What about Tatsu? Can we get a shout out for Tatsu and his
Mm.
Yeah,
which
what's his
Elias
story?
Codius
Like, was
expertly
he
made fun of.
Yeah.
was he like? It looked like he could
I don't
actually
know.
fight. Like where they couldn't find
Well, he can
another.
fight kids.
Yeah,
He can
that's
fuck up.
right.
He can pick up teenagers.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
Um,
I thought the cast was a mixed bag. Like I was saying, I thought April O'Neil they should have cast someone a little closer to like the the cartoon counterpart, which
Mhm.
was like younger and just kind of like a little bit more silly. I was getting like PTA mom vibes from Judith Hogue. I thought Elias Cotillas, he's always great, and I thought he
yeah.
was good. But like the kid that plays Danny just doesn't leave an impression. You don't care about him
Mhm.
other than like the
What about
presence.
the police chief?
Oh, that was the
He's
guy. That was
great.
he was the guy that sang Macarena, right?
No
No,
way.
I'm
Wow,
What?
kidding.
I don't know how I don't know
It
how I
just looked
feel
like
about
him.
that, Telly.
Yeah. No, he
You know
was like
what's
a
crazy?
budget Paul Sorvino. That's what I felt about him.
It's nuts because he looks the most like, I know this isn't like a full adaptation from the cartoon, but he looks identical to like the cartoon version of Police
Yeah.
Stern or
Oh,
whatever. What do you think as a very young Sam Rockwell as
Yeah.
coffee,
The
cigarettes,
family. The
menthol?
yeah.
family.
Yeah,
Yeah, he called this family. Yeah. He was a good little cameo in there too.
hell yeah.
Um,
Overall, Steve Barron, director, mostly known for music videos, but like really known ones. Take on Me by Aha, that was him.
really?
Billie
Oh wow.
Jean, that was him.
Wow.
Movies,
Okay.
the only one that I saw, which I love as a comedy, Coneheads. I thought that was I don't know how this one, but there's a movie, Electric Dreams, that I want to
Oh,
check
I've
out
seen
that he
that
did.
before. That's the guy like because his computer falls in love with him.
Oh, okay. Is that any
Yeah.
good? Worth checking out?
I saw it 30 years ago. It was okay. It's silly by especially watching it now, but it was okay. It's interesting, but it was funny knowing like reading about Steve Barron after watching this again. I'm like, wow, he did music videos, and I don't like Russell Mulcahy did Highlander, and you can see that music video pedigree in that film.
Mhm.
I did not really see that in Steve Barron's like music video experience in Turtles.
I mean, I feel like maybe
Like
because
even
of
the way
some
they
of
used
the,
music and all that kind of stuff, I just didn't. Did, wouldn't. I wouldn't know at all that this director had a background in music videos.
I don't know. For me, I think maybe because of the limited locations and how they're like, there's like a 20-25 minute fight scene in one, of like how they run together. I think that's probably a little
Right,
bit the
but even in a
extent.
music video, you do have limited location. You do something with like the Billie Jean video, right?
Mhm.
You make the fucking floor light up. And I was just like, yeah, there should have. I wanted a little bit. I would expect more pizzazz
Mhm.
visually from a music video director. Everything sort of the scenes are not very colorful.
Mhm.
They're just like there's no depth in some of the shots. It's just like they're standing in a black background. And again, maybe that's a budget thing.
Mhm.
But, it's just I thought the film would have benefited from just a little bit more stylization.
It's crazy to hear you say that because I feel like this movie for me just oozes style. Like again, maybe it's not polish, but definitely style. The fight scenes on the rooftop with what's clearly a backdrop, really low lit. The shots that are shot inside the sewers. Again, that intro for Shredder with the long like shadows. The flash or whenever Splinter's telling a story to the kid, right? The background behind him kind of goes black, right? Like I just
Almost
I
like a
one of the
play, like a
almost like
kabuki
a
play. Like,
I just feel like one of the things that really caught me as an adult watching this was the style, how stylized it was, and how again the stylization was really gritty and dark for something that was marketed towards kids. So yeah, I don't know.
yeah, for me, I think I really like the direction of the movie because I felt like it was so economic in the sense that every choice made felt like it was trying to do as much as possible without being like confusing or doing too much. So, for example, like that whole little exchange at the beginning where someone steals a wallet and it's going from like hand to hand to hand to hand, and the last hand is just like the foot soldier hand that
Mhm.
show like it's just a non-verbal showing the course of this
Who's
world.
pulling the strings?
Yeah, just
Yeah.
like one shot of the old lady, sitting outside. She goes to get something. Her TV stolen. They did that like kind of trick shot where it's like the truck with all the boxes. The
Mhm.
guy turns around, and then a second later, all the boxes are gone. I thought there were a lot of little moments that tried to get the most bang of the buck. Like even though this was clearly filmed on a lot of sets.
I gotta say
Uh,
that opening made me laugh. Like when April O'Neil's reporting, like, oh, there's like this theft ring going around the city. I'm like, 35 years later, that would be like welcome if that's the worst thing that's happening in New York right now.
Hell yeah.
Oh, that's funny.
Well, that's why it's like a timeless. I mean, as long as New York has something going on, this is a
Mhm.
relevant joint. But even just like I think some of the choices made of like the way, hey, we want ninjas. We're not going to say that they're ninjas. Here's like a practical use of them using their ninja skills in a different setting to kind of like have that up. And I just thought that the art direction of like the different locations of the foot soldiers lair is fucking awesome and layered of like being a place that recruits kids. It's like, what would you expect with that kind of power as a bunch of runaways? And I think
Neverland
that,
Ranch.
yeah, that the
You keep on going back to because
I'm
kids
not gonna let
like
that go.
sewers.
Yeah. Yeah.
that I thought the sewers, I don't know, I just thought the places and just had a lot of like iconic shots. I love Raphael looking over the roof of like, the full city, like, mixed in with all those other scenes. I thought just gave it like a full, movie opens up on a skyline with the World Trade Center in it. It's like this is a New York joint. But Sally Menke was on this as well, Quentin Tarantino's longtime editor, rest in peace. But yeah, just directing wise and movie wise, I don't know. I just thought this was a full meal on things. Let's go into favorite scenes of the movie. Telly, what was yours?
Oh man. I always like the subway scene. Although watching it again, I do see some flaws in it. In terms of just the way the set is decorated. Like they have like they're obviously covering up the subway sign, and then when they reverse the shot, you see the actual sign.
Oh
So
yeah, yeah.
but I always loved, like, I just love scenes inside an actual New York subway. So I
Mhm.
appreciated that fight scene in the subway, in a real subway and not a set.
Yeah. What about you, Carlos?
A fellow chucker, eh? I don't know why it's
We need a
iconic.
counter for you every time you reference that
I
scene.
I
Is
just
ready.
really love that scene. And of course, I caught myself just ridiculously repeating that line over and over to the extent that I'm not sure how my friend didn't just smack me in my face and leave immediately. God bless her patience. But it's something that always stuck with me. I always remember. And again, it's one of those, I haven't seen this movie in, however many years, but I've seen that scene just kind of randomly over and over. And that also intros into some really great, I think one of the most interesting fight scenes of the movie, and then that also leads into like what I feel like is the emotional core of the movie. So like that whole sequence, what it represents and how it was executed, I feel like is a chef's kiss.
All right.
Hmm.
I go. Mine is. I like the subway sequence, but for the same reasons that Telly. Also, I just thought it was like a perfect, like, just self-contained moment of like what the turtles do fighting in the shadows. And as a New York resident, like that's, I feel like, straight up what vigilantism is all about. But the second one I'll just say is I really like the Shredder fight scene. Like you've had that build
Fan
up for a while. I thought it had the best choreography of
choreography,
what
agreed,
was going on, of just a
100%.
one-on-one, everyone like kind of playing their stuff. Thought it worked really well with the context of the movie, of seeing them together, them taking turns. They had like quips about like, that it never has to look for a can opener.
Yeah.
Just, I don't know, like it's like another one of those moments that gives like a lot of different
So
personality
how did this
to them.
get away from us? How did this get out of hand? That's a great scene.
Real quick, I do want to shout out the music, John Duprez. Like this movie, I think has some understated like song choices and cues, but like some stuff lives rent free in my mind of like the
In a half shell with the turtles for.
no, mine is the when he like points to his side, it's like dun 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 dun.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I think about that all the time, and the part where they fight Shredder is actually a really cool soundtrack moment. But I even felt
They
like
also they start going into the steel drums a little bit from like the commando, like dun, 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 dun,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Like you could tell when things were getting a little bit more serious because the music would switch into a more standard like 1980s action
Yeah, but
sequence,
listen
and
to
that's
that
when you know.
music when Raphael wakes up from consciousness. It's like, yeah, they got the strings going. It's a good it's a pretty good
Take it
soundtrack.
easy, yeah. What does a guy got to do to get some food around here,
Hell yeah. This
Leo?
movie, there's two more live action movies in this series, a few more computer animated ones, the most recent being from, I think, a year or two ago. Another live action reboot, the Bay joints. There's a whole bunch of comics. There's multiple animated series. For me, I don't know how, Carlos, you watched some of the series. Where does this stack up in the Pantheon?
So for me, this is clearly the number one, right? This is the OG, and I don't think anything that has come out subsequently has topped it. But I will say, I really do like Mutant Mayhem. So for me, that was a close second because it was a take I hadn't seen.
Mm-hmm.
Then conversely, like back in I want to say the early like 2010s, there was a Nickelodeon kind of reboot on it
Yeah.
that I thought was also really fantastic and had not only great animated choreography, but also the comedy was there and the chemistry between all the turtles was there. So this is the granddaddy. It's number one all time. But they were, and it's taken a while for me to find other ones that I feel like even are close.
Cool. Telly, that does it stack up with any of the others, if any,
I
that
saw
you've
all
watched?
three, the live action ones in the theater. It was definitely diminishing returns, especially, and also the tricky thing is when you're watching these movies and you're getting older as the movies are still coming out, and you're just sort of continually outgrowing them as the further entries come out, but also they get shittier and shittier. So yeah, I think I've never seen any of the Michael Bay ones or any of the cartoons that
Don't.
they came out afterwards, following the original series. But so this is really my only out of the three. This is definitely the top.
If you like, did you like Into the Spider Verse, Telly? Did you see that?
I didn't see that. No.
I was going to say because if you did, I would say I would recommend the Mutant Mayhem is good.
Yeah, I would say it's worth checking out anyway. This movie was had a budget of 13.5 million, so it was an indie joint, and didn't get distribution until literally halfway through production. But with a 13.5 million budget, it had a box office return of 202 million, making it the best grossing indie movie until Blair Witch Project.
Oh wow.
Pretty wild to think of this movie as like an indie, the way that we're talking about. But I mean, like, in terms of the years, like, this was less than what was it like? We watched a couple of $14 million. I think it was like McBain and First Blood, which you start to think about what you can do with money, and this was just, I don't know. I thought it felt like a good use. It's a really nice return. Critical reaction for me is very interesting. Rotten Tomatoes has this as a 43%, where the audience score is an 81%. IMDb a little closer with a 16.8 out of 10, and Letterboxd with a 3.3, which I feel is surprisingly low. Valerie Monroe from Entertainment Weekly wrote at the time, but it's not the sexism that has generated the most objections, talking about April O'Neil. It's the violence. In the first 5 minutes of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, there is a mugging, and one turtle is hurled around, rolled over the hood of a car, and dumped headfirst into a wire garbage can. The National Coalition on Television Violence claims there are more than 190 acts of violence in this movie. It seemed to me that there were at least that many in the opening scene. Though the violence continues nonstop, a lot of it is obscured. You can hear the thwack of a hit, but most of the contact happens so fast you can't even see it. Even so, there's no question the movie glorifies violence as a way of resolving conflict.
Boo.
How else
It's
do you
nuts, I
resolve
guess.
conflict? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, watching this as like a review for a 5-year-old, I guess, as I don't know. I'm not sure if I would disagree with that take in that.
I just don't like the way she said it. I just don't like the
Well,
vibe.
the UK,
It's giving hater.
they had all these laws, like censorship laws against like showing like weapons, like like the like nunchucks and stuff like that, like especially like Asian weapons. They banned those in the UK. So I guess there's a different time, and seeing like calling Ninja Turtles like this movie violent by today's standards is like ridiculous.
Yeah, which I think is like, for me watching the second one, there's a couple of moments where like Michelangelo like fights with sausages instead of his nunchucks, and I'm like, All right, that was kind of corny. Let's go to Letterbox to see what the streets are saying. Mikey P wrote, "I want this movie grinded up and shot into the atmosphere with my ashes, so we can rain down upon the world in splendor. At some point in the million watches as a kid, I dreamed of showing my own kids this film. That day was today. There is nothing more to live for. Next rainstorm, look to the sky and feel us both upon your faces." Five
Oh
out of
man,
five.
Wow.
he doesn't mention how it went over. I'm really curious to know, like,
I
what do
know,
kids
kids
today
like
think of it.
fuck turtles.
This shit sucks.
That's my biggest fear.
And
And
these are guys from Call of Duty. That's
yeah,
probably
Max Taylor says awful but very funny. The rat doing karate is fucking amazing. Half
that
a
is true.
star out of 5. Well, hopefully my co-hosts are a little bit kinder to the film than a half out of 5. So we'll go around the room and start with Carlos. What'd you think of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles?
Again, it was really great coming back to this. I'm really glad it held up, even though I do see some of the cracks, in the veneer. I still really, really loved it. And so this is going to go under the title of one of those movies that is still one of my favorite movies of all time, even if it's not like academically a fine piece of art. I'm going to go and give this 4.5 out of 5 rats mimicking her moves from his cage.
That's such a good one.
All right.
Tally.
So for me, a lot of the technical side of things I really admire and what they did with the limited budget that they have. I thought the direction was it was a bit confusing. Where the director was obviously going against the grain, because I'm sure the producers probably wanted a straight up just like live action version of the cartoon series. And I think Steve Bannon was fired before the movie completed too. So I think there was obviously some tension there. Wow, someone's
Sorry.
turkey's done.
That was my sorry.
All right.
Sorry about that. Someone's ringing my bell.
So I feel very much mixed the same way when I saw it originally. So I'll give this 2.5 giant Steinbeck references out of 5.
Okay. For me, this movie, I don't know. I can always defend it. Part of the discipline was every time I heard something I disagreed with, I'm like, well, actually, So it's just this movie's held up for me. I think it's such a bold attempt to do something that I don't think there's any other movie that has done it and done it that way as well. This is a 5 Jose Canseco bats out of 5 for
Wow.
me. I
Nice.
love this movie. I have this in like one of my favorite movies, and I'll defend this as just straight up like it's a good comic movie, it's a good family movie, and it's just a good movie. So thank you for watching the 1990 review of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I'm going to kick it to Carlos, who has the pick for the next episode of Shoot Punch Kick. Carlos.
Thank you, Dash. So for next week, I am gonna get back in our Wesley Snipes bag, and we will be watching the granddaddy of Marvel action films with the 1998 film Blade.
Oh,
All right. Cool.
Because apparently some motherfuckers are always trying to ice skate uphill.
always. Awesome. Well, make sure you tune in next week. But until then, you can like this video, you can comment on this video, and you can subscribe from this video. On behalf of the Shoot Punch Kick hosts, Carlos Telly and myself, we are out. See you next week.
Peace.